Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you guys to some of the MVPs that were on Momentum's original launch team. So this is Stan and Heidi Munson, Jason and Leah Peterson, Nicole Gates, and my lovely wife, the Shannon Smith. Man, first off, you guys, get this in your mind, grasp this. It was 15 years ago that we launched Momentum. Like, first off, just how does that make you feel?
Old.
Very old. Yeah.
Man, like I'm around a whole bunch of old people.
So for those of you who don't know, a launch team is just a team, mostly volunteers, that put the groundwork into launching a church, launching it publicly. And, there's some staff or interns maybe too, but it's mostly volunteers. And so that's really what a launch team is. And I kind of want to give people from Momentum the opportunity just to hear some stories from these guys about what it was like to be a part of something like that. And so just kind of starting there, all of us at the time that Momentum became a concept lived in Northern Virginia and the suburbs of DC. How did you guys sense or realize that God was calling you to be a part of Momentum's launch team and eventually move to Northeast Ohio?
There was a leadership conference that we went to at that church in Virginia, and they had all of the church planters that had come in or told stories about their churches. And that was really, really exciting for me to hear. And then at the end, Dan gets up and says, hey, I don't know if you said we're considering or if we are going to Cleveland to plant a church.
If you're feeling moved to move, was the phrase.
Yeah.
And we had been talking about this stirring in our heart to move, to leave this area. Like, we're going to get out of this town. We're done with it. And God had been working that in our hearts for probably a year. Some of these things are so small and minute that people are just going to dismiss them, but I saw them clearly as God painting, right? And so I had 3 kids at different times in the year add to my classes. Every one of them came from Cleveland, every one of them. So then it was just really common. I'd meet some stranger and they'd say they were from Cleveland. So Ann and I were downtown down at the airport watching airplanes take off, and this lady was down by the water, and she says, "Are you guys from this area?" And I kind of explained where we were, and I said, "Where are you from?" "Wait a minute, are you from Cleveland?" And she goes, "That's freaky. How'd you know that?"
So Stan and Heidi, you said that you had this stirring in your mind that you guys wanted to get out of Northern Virginia. I was the exact opposite. I mean, my entire life, I love Northern Virginia, and I always promised myself one thing: I would never move north of Northern Virginia because I love hot weather. I hate cold weather. But I remember being in a sermon at New Life in the Church of Virginia, and Dan and Shannon, you all saying that you were moving. And I was like, wait a second, why do I want to go? Why am I thinking about going? Like, this is the exact opposite of what I want to do. And I was a new Christian, and I was like thinking to myself, all right, God, well, what's up with this Christianity thing? Now you're going to make me move? Like, what's that all about? So
it was like right after our daughter was born. And like Cleveland had kind of been like off the radar at that point. But I'm not kidding. Like right after she was born, I remember just like every day, just feeling this strong sense, like this nudging, like you're supposed to go to Cleveland. And I remember being afraid of mentioning it to Jason because, we had just had a baby. His whole family lived in Virginia. And finally I brought it up and he said, yeah, it's weird, but I've been feeling the same thing. I mean, I think it was a really strong feeling for both of us. And
well, it's crazy because I remember the day. It was a Saturday morning, and we literally woke up and just like looked at each other. Like, I'm not kidding. It was almost exactly like this, and we both almost simultaneously said, "Let's go to Cleveland." I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it wasn't too far off. And literally, I remember Leah getting up and walking to the computer and writing you all an email. And we knew right then and there, like within a span of 10 minutes, like it was done. We're going.
I think that's kind of what clued us in, that it probably was God telling us, because the timing made no sense. And it's not something where we would just be like, hey, life is super hard now. We just had a baby. Why don't we move to a different state where we know no one except for a couple church friends, you know?
I think you invited me to like a road trip with a couple other youth people that were a little bit older. I think I was the youngest one in the group because I was still a junior, like I think just entering my junior year of high school. And I went to the trip and got to see Cleveland, and I don't know, it was just like a weird sense of peace because I was a very anxious and busy young person like in high school. I just remembering just like walking around the city and just hearing your vision of, you know, the kind of church that you wanted it to be. It just got the wheels turning. So, you know, when I got home and it was time to apply for colleges, I just applied. I'm like, you know what, just for the heck of it, I'm going to apply to some Cleveland colleges and then apply to, you know, my top, you know, 5 or 6 schools, you know, and I had really good grades. You know, I graduated with a, you know, 4.0, you know, honor society. So I had like my pick. I was determined, I'm going to get in any of these schools. And when those letters started coming back, it was definitely a God thing. Like I got accepted to every single school I applied to in Cleveland, but for some reason, none of my schools in Virginia or Maryland or North Carolina that I applied to, I was able to get in. You know, I graduated high school and 2 weeks later, I packed up my little Jeep Cherokee and drove to Cleveland. And like looking back at it, you know, at 15 years, I'm like, wow, what was I thinking? I was so young. Like you see, like, you know, especially with some of these kids that are part of the student ministry, like they're going off to college. I'm like, I went and started a church when I was your age. It's just,
That's an incredible story.
I'm
I
so
never
proud
knew.
of you,
Yeah.
Minna. I'm so proud of you.
I mean, what 18,
Yeah.
19-year-old says, I'm moving to start a church?
yeah.
I didn't.
What memories, whether, you know, fun or impactful or whatever, do you have of pre-launch, that time where we were in Cleveland starting Mo groups and serving in the neighborhoods leading up to our first public service at Cinemark Theater in Valley View? What memories do you have of that?
We actually didn't show up until a couple weeks before that launch. So it got me thinking about, well, what were we doing in Virginia to prepare for that? And I remember praying, God, I know that something amazing is going to happen, and I know it's going to change lives. Please start preparing the people that are going to come across Momentum.
We actually felt moved to move there in 2005, and we waited. I wanted to teach one more year. They offered me calculus that year, so I wanted to get that under my belt. So when I moved, I would have that. And by doing so, housing prices started to tumble in that 2006 timeframe. So we'd already, when we figured, oh, we'll sell our house, be able to take the cash share, buy a house in Cleveland outright. So we had it all ranged backwards. And it started tumbling, and we couldn't sell our house when we moved there. And one of those spiritual lessons is that, you know, God really moved us to move in 2005, but we decided to wait to 2006. And that decision caused us financial devastation, right? Because we just couldn't pay for 2 houses and all that stuff. And that spiritual lesson is, nowhere in the Bible does it say, you know, when God says go, there's an exclamation point after. It's not like go, parentheses, at your own convenience. You know, when he calls you, it's time to go.
We did so many door-to-door service projects that weren't, you know, cold turkey, knock on the door, let me tell you about Jesus, you know, he's my Lord and Savior. It was more of, can we give you 9-volt batteries for your smoke detector, you know, things like that. And one time there was a youth group that came up from Clinton, Ohio. We went door to door around our neighborhoods. And one of the vivid memories I have is me with about, I'd guess like 5 teenagers and maybe another adult, went to this door, knocked on the door to give a 9-volt battery away. And a guy who was about 90 years old answered the door buck naked.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
Naked. I mean, I was like, oh gosh, I didn't know what to do. And there was a teenage boy standing right next to me. I was like covering his eyes, like we're in an R-rated movie and there was a bad scene coming on or something. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Like I didn't know what to do to protect him from what I was seeing. And this guy just opened the door, totally buck naked. And I was like, you never know what's going to happen. You just never know.
I think I remember just worshiping in the Peterson's basement, and it wasn't finished back then.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
20, 25 people down there, and the kids would be upstairs, and there were always lots of kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were just so many kids running around, and I loved it. And
I remember just being in amazement that people who weren't part of the launch team were willing to come to our house and go to our basement for a church service. Like, I thought I was so amazed by that. I still am, that, not only that they trusted us, but that they wanted to come. And it was really special.
the first, because we do the back to school festivals now, but the first festival we ever did was at Cinemark in Valley View. Do you guys remember that? If you were here, that was like a couple weeks before we started.
Yeah.
I totally remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, like in the parking lot.
Yeah.
People came.
Yeah. People.
It was great. And there was so many people there. And I remember having that big, huge grill. I mean, that big barrel grill. And we were cooking like hundreds of hot dogs at a time.
Oh, yeah.
And then there were some people that came, they couldn't quite figure out, and they would want to give us money. And we're like, no, and they'd take like 25 hot dogs,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Back, like, and we're like, no, really, take them. No, that's what it's about,
I remember there was a woman who had a big purse, and she was she thought she was stealing hot dogs.
I remember that.
She was like looking around. I was right there. I was like, I see you doing that right now. And she like put in like 10, 15 hot dogs. I'm like,
and you're like putting some more in there for her now,
Yeah. Yeah, right.
I think for me, the back to school fest, that first one, just knowing, like, being a child whose family had a hard time getting school supplies, and just knowing how impactful that was for those kids and those families. I think that was powerful for me. And I just really was proud of Momentum and had a sense of like, okay, this is right. Like, what we're doing is good. Like, this is what, I felt like it was a confirmation of like, I made the right choice.
What was going on in your mind the night before we launched originally, before opening day, first public service at Cinemark? Do you remember anything about what was going on in your mind then?
There's like all these things, like as I'm trying to sleep, going through my head that kept me up. So I remember like not sleeping well that night. But like, I remember, I slept a little bit and woke up in the morning and I just felt at peace. Like, it was so weird. Like, I tossed and turned all night, but then when I woke up that morning, I felt calm. Like, definitely God's presence with that. Also, the team of people that kind of came together to help put the final touches on Mo Kids, and putting together baby gates and like a basketball hoop, and helped me hook up like the TVs and the Xboxes and making sure it was a fun place for kids.
I know it's really surreal going to bed the night before, and I travel to speak, and so I'm used to speaking to strangers, but it was such a different feeling to be like, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to speak to hopefully some strangers. Hopefully somebody's going to show up, but it's strangers that might be our church then. Like, it's strangers that we're going to then be in charge of spiritually shepherding and discipling. And that was just such a strange feeling that night. I remember laying in bed thinking about that, like, what is going to happen tomorrow? What little memories do you have, if any? Because I know, man, we were so busy. It had to be foggy. What little memories do you have of September 10th, 2006, which was our first public service at Cinemark Theater in Valley View? What do you remember from that?
I don't know if you remember, but there were sound issues a lot in Cinemark Theater. And so we'd be doing, you guys would be doing dry runs with worship, and there was like the aliens. Remember the aliens and the
alien noise coming out of the
That's
theater.
what we called them, because it sounded like these crazy aliens like screeching. But I remember it was launch Sunday, and that was going on, and there was no resolution. It's like, all right, well, people are here. We're going to go. And I was like, what do you mean we're going to go? Like, this is going to happen in the middle of service. And like, people are going to like, and just like run out. And it never happened.
And it was such an obnoxious noise. It was like,
Yeah.
Like it was no
good Sunday. That's what it sounded like.
That sounded suspiciously like the sound, Dan. That sounded a lot like. I don't remember ever hearing that sound and seeing you. Now I think about it.
Yeah, where were you?
I just remember thinking the night before and that morning, is anybody even going to come? Like, I just had no idea. Will people show up? I don't know.
Yeah.
It was amazing. The only thing I can think of is how amazing it was that where there was, in Dan, you're really good at saying this phrase. It's like where there was no church the week before, there was a church then, and the week after, and the week after, which is cool.
Do you remember the count, like the head count on the opening Sunday? Wasn't it like 250 or something like that?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's 253, I think.
Yeah, and I do remember, Shannon, I was scared that there wasn't going to be a big turnout, and I remember very vividly like looking around the theater at all the filled seats, and there was just this sigh of relief. Isn't the word? It was joy, you know. But yeah, that was cool.
This person, somebody that started coming to church, her name was Melissa, and she came up to me and said, this church has a lot of people on staff. And I was like, I don't think so. And her impression that there was a lot of people on staff is because all the volunteers' passion looked like somebody being paid to go to work to start this church. And it was an absolutely true statement. It looked like this had a huge staff of people who were being paid, but they were just all volunteers.
That's really the vision of all the work prior to that, of building that team up, building the people to see that they're not just doing it just to do it. It was really that leadership to really help people see the importance of what was going on.
All right, one last question. So from being a part of Momentum's launch team, what would you say was the most impactful part of it, whether back then or just in your spiritual journey in general? How did it impact you? How did it maybe grow your faith, mature you spiritually? You know, what was some of the impact it had on you?
There were so many good memories, you know, and even though we were getting up early on Sunday to set up at Center Mark, even though we were doing like crazy math service products and stuff, like it was all good times, you know, and like, I miss it. I just think back to that whole period of time, and it was fun. And like, we were like a band of brothers and sisters, like really on a mission. Yeah. And like Stan said, like you guys painted this great vision, and we all followed it because we believed in what God was doing. And it was, we did have little tiny kids, but it was awesome. Like every second of it was awesome. And I kind of compare it to my life right now, where I'm just working a ton of hours, and I'm like, gosh, like I wish I was doing that again. You know what I mean? So maybe Dan, you should start another campus and get it all over again.
Yeah.
We make a pot of coffee.
Go get that funding.
Definitely the camaraderie and the adventure of all of it. I mean, I've never experienced anything like that before or since. And, you know, not to mention, we were all very close because of what we were doing. And I felt like I felt like God was closer than most times I've felt in my life. You know, he was definitely right there. And it was a really special time for sure.
The idea that the people in the group would do baptisms, and that you kind of commission people to do baptisms, and how that, I mean, I have some fantastic memories of going to this creek not too far from us in Brecksville and baptizing so many people there, you know. And
I totally forgot that we baptized probably 30 people in the garage at our first house, you know. And I'll never forget the very first one, and I was on the phone with somebody afterwards, and it was one of my family members. I was like, we just baptized somebody in my house. And it was just the coolest thing. And then I remember the very first baptism service we had. at Cinemark, and those were amazing memories. I'll never forget those.
I was just so amazed that like the Petersons and Nicole, the Munsons, and gosh, more and more people moved to help us and create this team, and that God provided jobs. Just in the moments of pure panic of what the heck are we doing, God would always, I don't know, show himself somehow. And every time someone has accepted Jesus at Momentum, it just reinforces to me, God brought us here for that person.
Right.
Like for that person. He is chasing that person, and all the money it took, and having people move and start this thing and whatever's going on right now, like it's for that person and for that person and for that person. And man, that has kept me going through the times that just seem like we're never going to get through, the valley, and on the mountaintops, just thinking, God, show us, what to do next. I don't know. It's just been amazing.
Yeah, there's been a few times where we've been baptizing someone or seen someone being baptized that we've said, man, we know your story and Momentum was started for you. Like someone who just thinks, man, I can't believe I'm a part of a church now. I can't believe I'm doing this. There's been quite a few times where I've looked at that person and been like, man, you're like the poster child for why we started Momentum. You are the epitome.
I remember I was building something out of steel. And so I went to this place over in Bedford, I think it was, to buy some steel to build this thing. And so it was like a wholesaler or something. And I went in there and I was asking them for the pieces and everything. And I had like, I can't remember what brought up the church, but I said, yeah, this is for Momentum Church. And the lady that was in the back goes, isn't that the church Chuck goes to? And I said, Chuck who? And he's like, I can't remember his full name or whatever, but he was actually coming to our group for a while. So as soon as she said that, I knew that who it was. And he was somebody that struggled a lot, right? And so I remember them looking over at me and go, what kind of church are you to let Chuck come to?
Wow.
And I was like, that kind of church.
I think what I was going to say to wrap up.
I got an idea to wrap it up. Just out of these people that are sitting here, who's your favorite?
Thank you so much. Like, I think you guys know, you guys started somebody's church that didn't find the church till 10 years later. And that just continues to have ripple effects on people. I mean, when I think of the kids who were little tiny kids then, whether they even went to church or not, that are now students in our student ministry, and the ways that they're being impacted by Jesus. I mean, all this goes back to a big splash in 2005 and 2006 that kind of got the thing going, the momentum, if you will. And so, man, thank you guys for the sacrifice. Thank you for like your generosity from day one. Thank you for all that you guys put into this, but I sincerely love you guys. And it's so cool to have done this with you. Maybe just to end lamely, we might use this or we might not, but maybe we can end by saying happy anniversary, Momentum. I'll do 3, 2, 1, then say it.
So it's really on 4.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wait, I'm forgetting what I'm supposed to say. Okay. Happy anniversary, Momentum.
That's because brain
Thank
cells.
you, Leah.
I'm gonna say birthday by accident.
3, 2, 1. Happy
anniversary, Momentum.
I couldn't get through it.